Welcome into episode 11 of College Football Filtered. I'm Chris Moxley. You can find me at Chris Moxley19. You can find everything I do at Campus to Canton, both on YouTube, Twitter, our website. And since if you're not familiar with the show and what we do here, it's it's basically reviewing the previous day's events in college football and breaking down what they mean from a fantasy perspective or just a general news perspective. Give you the best information as quick as possible each morning. And, you can find us live between 7 to 8 every morning and during the week. And hopefully you learn a couple things. But since we're really beholden to the news cycle and nothing is happening in college football currently, I'm going to do something a little bit different today with this show. We're going to talk about the average weight gain for running backs from the time that they're recruits to the time that they go to the combine. So this has been a big, question, I think, for a lot of people. And, the reason that I brought this up, or even thought about doing this, was there was stuff about Raleigh Brown going around. If you don't know Raleigh Brown, he's committed to USC. He is about 185. He's listed about 185 according to 24/7. Whether or not he is 185 is a different question, but people want to draft him fairly early, and I actually think he's a pretty poor value at his ADP. So I wanted to figure out, okay, how much weight can he realistically add, or can we realistically expect him to add? And so I went back since 2008, and these are players who attended the combine. So we have to have some sort of official measurement data. So that brings my sample to 307 players. Across this sample, the average total weight gain for a running back is about 12.5 pounds. All I did to get this number was I took their combine weight and I subtracted it from their recruit weight where it was available. Obviously, this isn't everybody, since some recruit weights are just not there, but it's a pretty big sample. If I break this down a little bit further through the 307, about 58 of those players were Group of 5 players. 249 of those were Power 5 players. Group of 5 players actually added a little bit more weight, so they averaged 17 pounds of weight gain from recruitment to combine. Power 5 players added an average of 11.4 pounds, so about almost a pound lower than average. The lowest conference specifically was the SEC. So SEC running backs actually only added 8.6 pounds on average. And I had a couple theories about this. So one is they're pretty developed when they come into school generally. SEC running backs, like, they're big dudes. Like, you see Branson Robinson at Georgia, like he's a freak athlete already. You don't see a lot of those guys going Group of 5. But so they do have an average weight for the SEC when they come into school of 206 pounds, which is, again, by far. So you can only add so much weight at that point. The other reason that there could be a big discrepancy between Group of 5 and Power 5 is they might not have like a recently updated verified weight on 24/7. So it might be a weight from a little bit like a little bit longer ago. And so it might not reflect weight gain entering into school. So that's potentially two different reasons. I tend to think it's the first one. I think that the recruits are probably just bigger, faster, stronger. But I think it's probably a little bit mix of both. So to summarize that, average 12.5, Group of 5 players add 17 pounds, Power 5 players add about 11.4 pounds. I broke this down by star rating too, because I actually want to answer that second question of, well, is it just bigger, faster dudes? And kind of. 4 and 5 star running backs added an average of 9.8 pounds overall. But Power 5 added 9.9 pounds, slightly higher when you apply this filter. And so I had a couple thoughts on this one as well. It's within the range where I don't really think too much about it, like 8.6, 11.4 pounds versus like 9.8 pounds isn't a huge difference in the grand scheme of things. But it begs the question for me, if we're projecting upside with these 4 or 5 star kids, are we expecting them to fill out their frame, for example? So they're adding, a 5 star adding 9 pounds versus a low 4 star adding like less weight. is interesting because I think that when we project some of these high end 4 stars and 5 stars, we see a kid who maybe is like 6'1", 190. I say, okay, well, if this dude fills out, he could be a beast. If he gets to like 205 or like 207, and that probably goes into that projection, which is why players are adding a little bit more weight at a higher star, like the highest end of stars, like 5-star kids. Fairly interesting. But when we look at only these 29 5 stars, only looking at 5 stars, they had an average of 10.3 pounds, which is higher than 4 and 5 stars combined, higher than Power 5 by itself. So that, I think, the theory that we expect these kids that are incredibly athletic, but maybe a little bit slight, but have the frame to fill it out, add more pounds and probably are projected higher long term. So you can expect these 5 stars to add like about 10.3 pounds over the course of the sample, which is 29 kids, 29 key kids that actually attended the combine. Yeah. So again, not a gigantic sample, but it's enough to, I think, point us in the general direction of a couple conclusions. So one more thing that I thought was kind of interesting was the split between all-purpose backs and regular running backs. So they 24/7 took this designation away, I believe, last year, but there's some interesting data here when we go back actually look at historically. So there were 53 all-purpose backs that attended the combine over the course of our sample from 2008. They added an average of 16.5 pounds in the Power 5 for a total average of 15.3 pounds. Sorry, other way around. 15.3 pounds on average. 16.5 pounds in Power 5. SEC specifically added 15.6 pounds. So the average weight gain of an all-purpose back is actually depending on where you look, 3 to 4 pounds greater than a traditional running back, which is interesting as well, right? Like, I wonder if we're applying the same theory and saying, well, we have guys who maybe are a little bit smaller that are in that pass catching role. They probably have more weight that they can add. And they do. It plays out that way. So an all-purpose back is adding about 15 pounds, assuming they're Power 5. So that's pretty interesting. And so they don't have this classification anymore, but you can still look at a player and say, okay, well, this player is probably going to add XYZ weight based on them having the skill set of an all-purpose back. So a guy like Raleigh Brown, who was the impetus for this whole thing, was probably an all-purpose back that you could classify as such. So you can expect him to add about like 15 pounds. And if he's actually listed at 180, that he could get up to 200-ish. I mean, it's a stretch for sure. I mean, this is the average, but it is there's a chance he gets up to 200. And it's 200 enough to actually get drafted at size. I don't know. The average combine weight for running back has been like between 212 and 215. So that's still pretty slight. But here's your sliver of hope for people. If we were to assume that he'd be an all-purpose back, that's kind of the path that he would need to take. So to summarize all that, because that's a lot of different numbers being thrown at you. Average weight gain for a running back that attended the combine from recruitment to actual combine testing, 12.5 pounds. Power 5 running backs average in the same sample 11.4 pounds, 249 in that Power 5 sample. SEC was by far the smallest, adding 8.6 pounds. When we look at 4 and 5-star kids, they're lower on average, but 5 stars add 10.3 pounds, and which is, the very high end of kids. They're projecting a little bit higher weight gain to happen and fill out their frame. Players who would be classified as all-purpose backs or have been classified as all-purpose backs in the past were adding between 3 and 4 more pounds than average. So average is 12.5. They were adding between like 15 and 16 and a half pounds of weight. So it's an interesting projection to look at it through those different lenses. The last one which is overlisting RBs, which there's not as much data on this one because some teams are just really bad about keeping track of running back weight. But I wanted to actually dive into this a little bit and figure out how much are teams actually overlisting their running backs by compared to what they come in at the combine. So schools are actually better than I thought they'd be. They overlist the running backs by like 0.3 pounds, which is like nothing at the end of the day. But the worst defender in all of college football that has more than one running back to look at is Louisiana, who overlists their running backs by 9 pounds on average. A lot of this is Elijah Mitchell, who was listed at 217 or 218 and then came in at 201, which is a 17-pound difference. And I had people in my mentions yesterday talking about this, and I was like, they say he cut weight for the combine. Yeah, you don't cut 15 pounds of weight for the combine. They were just poor at listing him. Really, it was 17 pounds. They just did a bad job listing him. In general, Group of Five overlist their running backs by or actually they underlist their running backs, which I thought was pretty interesting, by an average of about 3 pounds. So my guess as to why this is happening is they're not as meticulous with their weights. So a guy who came in maybe like 190 and then is going to go to the combine at 200, maybe they never kept up with his weight between his like junior and senior year, and he really comes in at like 19. He's listed at 197, 196, and he comes in at 200. And so that's probably the scenario that's playing out there. But Group of Five programs generally underlist their running back weights. Power Five programs, not as surprisingly, overlist their running backs by like half a pound. Again, that's within the range where I'm like, whatever. But some of the worst offenders in this from a Power Five perspective is Oklahoma, who overlists by 5.5 pounds, Michigan State, who overlists by 4.5 pounds, and UCLA, who overlists by 4.5 pounds. I actually had to dig into the UCLA one because it felt like a lot when I was pulling this data together, and they actually overlist by 9 pounds. Sorry, I was wrong on that number. So they overlist by 9 pounds on average, and I was trying to figure out why or how this is happening, because that's a pretty big number. So two of their players, Joshua Kelly first, was listed at 219 on UCLA's website, actually came in at 212 at the combine, so 7 pounds. Demetric Felton last year was listed at 200, and that was a very suspect 200 according to like anybody who was watching him. Was listed at 200, came in at 189. So UCLA is by far the worst offender here at overlisting their running backs among Power 5 programs. But in general, schools are pretty honest about it. Like the SEC overlists by half a pound. The Pac-12, generally speaking, overlists by like 2 pounds. Big 10, Big 12, like they're all within a pound range. So Pac-12 is the worst offender, but UCLA is driving part of that. But yeah, in general, I wouldn't worry all that much about overlisted players in terms of what they might weigh at school versus what they might weigh at the combine. There's not a lot of data that shows that schools are lying to us. Very specific examples. So in Michigan State, who overlists by almost 5 pounds, let's see what Kenneth Walker comes in at, right? Oklahoma, a big gap was for Ramondre Stevenson, for example. So we have a little bit of data, but we have enough data to show that it's generally meaningless. So, again, we didn't have a lot of news, so I'll cut it off there. And, if you enjoyed this one and found the average weight gain portion interesting, like, subscribe on YouTube. We always want y'all over there. Sign up for a Campus Canton membership. We're doing stuff like this all the time, and the stuff we're doing behind the scenes is just fantastic. It really is impressive, and we finally got to release one of our big projects that a bunch of the people at the site have been working on, which is our 22 freshman guide and supplemental draft guide. So I think we have 184 players that we have broken down and talked about, and their upside long term, their situation, what the depth chart in front of them looks like, and how we expect them to perform. It's a really, really great document. Currently you can get it if you sign up for yearly membership, is included in your membership. So a lot of awesome stuff that we're doing over there. And the check us out at Campus Canton on YouTube, at Campus Canton on Twitter. Again, you could follow me at Chris Moxley 19 on Twitter. But anyway, hope you found some of the conclusions that we reached interesting. So enjoy your coffee, and we'll chat tomorrow.